Hello, and welcome to the Hero Report podcast. My name is Ari Cohen. I am a professor of political science at the University of Nebraska, and with me, as always, my good friend Matt Langdon of the Hero Construction Company. Matt is not in sunny Michigan as usual, but coming to us live from a hotel in Ontario. And interestingly enough, also with us from Ontario, formerly of Nebraska, our friend who I've started calling the comic book rabbi, Rabbi Ilan Emanuel. How are you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you.
I didn't realize it until I started talking that everyone but me is suddenly in Ontario. And of course, the best kept secret is that I grew up in Ontario. This is, in some sense, I don't know, an opposite day or reversal podcast or something.
We're all Canadians for a moment.
That's right. Or maybe we could call it a bizarro podcast.
There you go.
Because, of course, today we got together with our friend the comic book rabbi to talk about the latest comic book movie, that is Man of Steel, which we've all had a chance to see, to read many reviews about online, to engage in angry bickering about on Facebook, and so on and so forth. It's obviously a story with lots of heroism built in, and so I thought we should jump right in and talk about our impressions of the film, especially with regard to this question of how they did in terms of making it a hero movie.
Yep.
So, what do you guys think?
Well,
go ahead, Ilan.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, I should say that I do other things in my rabbinate other than talking about comic books, but this is a particular passion. That's true. So I really enjoyed the movie as a movie and as a remixing of a lot of elements of the Superman mythos. I think what struck me about the movie, which I think is part of where a lot of the controversy is that while Superman was not a darker character, the world he inhabited was much darker. And I think that's an aspect that people forget is when they say, oh, well, Superman doesn't do this, or Superman always does this, or any other character. A lot of it also depends on the world that you situate them in. If you make it a world in which it is possible to always avoid killing, guess what? You're never going to kill. But in a sorry, spoilers.
Oh yeah, thank you. That's a good point. From here on in, everything will be a spoiler. We will spoil the entire film. If you haven't seen the film and you got this far, just pause now and come back to this after you saw the film.
Right. So I think the world in which this Superman movie is set is a more gritty, realistic world, recognizing, I think, a lot of the realities of what admittedly such an unrealistic concept, if it were to in fact occur, how that would play out in the real world. And I think a lot of the problem with it is not with the character of Superman himself, but with the fact that they didn't shy away from admitting that this is a darker world and that the military aren't going to love him, and that sometimes very difficult choices need to be made, even by a superhero.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think it's probably in that darkness of the world or whatever that we really see the hand of Christopher Nolan. Would be my guess. That and, of course, all the destruction of buildings. You can't have Christopher Nolan without destroying a lot of buildings. So, I think that's right. I was a lot less struck by the I don't know. People have talked a lot about the action and how it's just sort of a crazy action festival or whatever. Certainly, the last hour of the film, let's say, is all about slamming people around and blowing things up and destroying glass skyscrapers. But Matt and I talked a little bit about this previously. The reason the movie worked for me And the reason that I am forgiving of all of that seemingly mindless, pointless fighting was all of the origin material that they built in that I thought they did really successfully with flashbacks and that sort of thing. Because that I thought was where we really saw the kind of, I don't know what, heroism in training that we talk a lot about on this podcast, right? That there was a lot of material there where you saw role models sort of helping Clark Kent become the person who would be Superman. And I thought that stuff was very interesting. So for me, that was why the film succeeded, was that there was when he's Superman, I don't care about him. I've said this a lot. I've said this on the podcast. I don't care about Superman. I find him, I know people are not going to love this, but I find him bland and uninspiring. I feel like there's really nothing, I mean, he got pummeled by another space alien for an hour, and he was just fine, right? There's no real risk or concern that we have when it comes to Superman. But pre-Superman, there's a lot there that's interesting. Right?
And I think, to me, that's part of what works about the movie as well, in that I think this movie does what the modern takes on Superman do well, which is to focus on Superman as an alien raised in Kansas, and what that means. In other words, Superman is a suit that he puts on to do what he chooses to do. And in this case, a rather snazzy suit, but it's a suit that he puts on because this is what Clark Kent is. Clark Kent is a person who is alienated by literally being an alien, but also is very humanized by being raised, as he says, with a little bit of a problem for any vestiges of secret identity that were left at the end of that movie. I was raised in Kansas. I'm as American as it gets. At that point, you got to wonder why everybody doesn't know who he is. But okay. But no, that really is what the modern incarnations have done, and I even have some of them here. There you go. This is the Superman Secret Origins. This actually is one that they based a lot of the stuff on in the movie itself, Birthright, which is interesting because the writer of it hated the movie. This I think in your email posting, it was in your Facebook posting. This is Mark Wade, and he hated it. But there's a lot of this stuff in there. Along with a lot of other things. And I said, they make him human. They make him Clark Kent. And that's why you care about him once he is Superman, is because you know that he's Clark Kent. You know that underneath all that is this guy who was raised on a farm, who has had trouble trying to work out where he fits in the world, etc., etc., etc.
I think the movie, rather than being a movie of heroism, was a movie using the hero definition of someone who inspires, or an idol. And they were, I think they were very explicit about that. His Kryptonian father was talking about, your role, you will be able to inspire the humans to be better. But the movie lacked in heroism, which I think Superman struggles with in general because he's invulnerable. There's very little heroism on display. We see these acts during his childhood and leading up to the reveal, where he saves kids from a sinking bus, where he saves people from a sinking oil rig, and has close encounters with wildlife for whatever reason in the first act of the movie, whether it's polar bears or whales or. Right. But so we see a lot of him making choices, and I think that was a big part of the movie. We got to see his influences. We got to see why he made these decisions, and they're all good decisions. We saw him battling with whether he should reveal his power to the world, because Pa Kent was concerned about what that might do to the world. So there was that struggle, but after seeing that, I watched the first two Batman movies again, and the first Batman movie was so explicit in its treatment of what heroism was, that it's not who you are on the inside, it's what you do that matters, things like that. And Dark Knight was very sort of social psychology, what's right, what's wrong. So I think for us to look at Man of Steel as a discussion point on heroism or heroic acts, it lacks. It wasn't as exciting on that topic.
I disagree with you. I see your point, but first of all, as I've said on a previous superhero podcast we've had, I think there are elements of heroism that, first of all, you don't have to in order to be a hero, I think, one, there's an aspect that involves just what you do, right? Doing something that helps other people, as an action can be heroic, even if you're not necessarily overcoming that much. But I think the other question, which I think is much more important for me here, is that, yes, he is physically invulnerable, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have to overcome things in order to do what he does. And I think that to me was very, very explicitly put in the movie, in the understandable fear of how the human race would react, which I think was part of the darker element of he has to overcome that fear. And I think for me there was a very interesting heroism involved in it that was actually on two flip sides of the same coin. You had his heroism in overcoming that fear that had been ingrained in him by his father. This is like a psychological study of how the parents' best intentions can mess you up. Because Pa Kent clearly was justifiably concerned about the effect that his and he instilled that concern in Clark, and he had to overcome that to do what he did. I think also on the flip side of it, there was, and I was very troubled by this scene, but there was a heroic aspect in it. When Pa Kent decides to let himself die in order to protect his son's identity, that's also, that was heroism there. It wasn't on, and the question is, was it heroism on Clark's part to do what his father clearly wanted, or was it cowardice at the time? And I really don't know.
Well, the whole thing, the whole conceit of that scene was really a shame.
Yeah, and I know. I had a real problem with the scene.
He runs back to go get the dog.
Yeah, I know.
And boy, the stakes just couldn't be lower, right?
I know.
I like dogs. I'm an animal guy. I prefer dogs to cats, whatever. But you know what, man? When there's a mile-wide tornado bearing down directly on your car, and everybody else has gotten to safety, and then someone's like, what about our golden retriever? And you say, you know what? I love that dog. After this is over, we're going to go get ourselves another golden retriever.
I agree entirely, although never tell my daughter. Because she loves the dogs completely. But look, you're right. The conceit of that, there was a real problem with the conceit of the scene. But it still raised an interesting question in terms of heroism, in terms of the willingness to die for what you believe in and to protect your loved ones. Whether he was entirely stupid to do it, that's another. No, but that is another question about heroism. Is how close a line between courage and stupidity, is a different question.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Kevin Costner sets up a scenario that is designed to make things terrible for his son.
Correct.
Right? This can't end well, right? No. So just let's not do it. Would be what one thinks to oneself.
Right, and that was one of the more unrealistic elements of this movie, I have to say.
We might say there's something, I don't know, maybe we'll use the word altruistic about going to try to rescue every last living thing before the tornado strikes. But from the perspective of Superman, right? He's not Superman yet, but we know he could do it, and he knows he could do it.
Absolutely.
And and he did it before with the school children in the bus, and everybody talked about it for a little while, and then things presumably died right back down, right? And you could do the same thing here, and he doesn't. Right?
No, and I think
his dad says, "Hey, don't save me,"
yeah.
and he's like, "All right."
And I was troubled by the scene, but I think it was, it still had an interesting question in terms of heroism. And I was troubled by it because I thought that the decision was stupid, but it could still be heroic. It was a dumb, heroic decision.
There are a number of those kinds of decisions that we see in the film, though, too, right? I mean, there is this whole thing about the battle raging in Metropolis.
Yeah.
There are a number of times where Clark Superman seems to err through omission or lack of creative thinking or being stuck in his ways or something, right? There's no reason for half of this city to get leveled. Like, it didn't have to happen.
Because they wanted to show it on screen.
Right.
That's the reason.
But it didn't have to happen, right? And other Superman movies wouldn't have let it happen. Right?
Well,
other Supermen wouldn't have let it happen.
Here's the thing, though. I think the reason they did that, and again, there were problems with it, because certainly when you're comparing it with with Superman 2, where he makes a particular point of getting the heck out of Metropolis so that nobody gets hurt. I think the reason they did that was, one, because it's a summer blockbuster and they wanted to show a lot of destruction, but also because I think that it was a way of showing quite how powerful these people are. And I think, and again, I think this is where the darkness of the world came in that I think there was an unspoken commentary on Superman 2, effectively, that, you know what? When gods fight, stuff gets broken because they're so powerful.
Sure. And that's the Avengers or Thor.
Correct.
Or, I mean, the other movies that we saw in the last couple of years and that we'll see again later this year, right?
Yeah.
I don't
know. You're right. He could have been more concerned with the And I think I will say, in terms of the movie itself, I think, as with many of these movies, I think the movie was better as a setup for the next movie than it was as a movie in and of itself. I think they set up a variety of elements of how the character will be, particularly with, and obviously we have to get to this part, the killing of Zod. They set things up in a way that I think will make for the second movie, hopefully, if they do it right, unlike the second Star Trek movie, but that's a different question. If they do it right, it's setting it up as a much as a really interesting movie, because I think, and I read about, I mean, it was my guess, and then I read about it. Either the producer or the director originally didn't want to put the death scene in. Didn't want to put him killing Zod. Chose to do so, in essence, because then it sets up why he will never kill again. So in a way, it creates a problem for the resolution of this movie, while making it a little bit more tangible why he would never kill again, having made such a difficult decision, and one which I think arguably was a heroic decision. That, and this is part of the problem with the sort of the issue of the darkness of the world, is that the original Superman movies set it up in a way where you didn't have to make those kinds of decisions, where there was always a way in which he could defeat the enemy without having to kill people. And the reality is that that's not always the case, which is why we have armies, which is why we have police officers with guns, which is why we have, the right to self-defense when someone comes at us, is that, at the end of the day, I think even though, I don't own a gun, certainly don't in Canada. I don't know if any of you do, but, I have no problem with the idea of if somebody is trying to kill my wife and daughter, that I would not be a bad person for defending myself and defending them. And if somebody was, and I think that in essence, we created there's this idea that Superman never kills, but I think that misrepresents the reality of the world that sometimes we live in, where you have to make difficult choices, and sometimes sometimes there are no good choices. It's the Star Trek Kobayashi Maru thing that Captain Kirk just didn't believe there was a no-win situation, and sometimes we find ourselves in no-win situations, and it set up a very interesting question of what is the heroism when you are faced with having to do something that is wrong, of killing somebody, but also the only way to stop other people dying is to do so.
Here's an interesting thing. A lot of people have spent a lot of time talking about the scene where Superman kills General Zod,
Yes.
And people are very troubled by it, as you say. I wasn't even remotely troubled by it. In part, I guess, because I'm not a Superman fan, and I don't care that Superman doesn't kill and all that business. I mean, that guy is a genocidal monster.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's not like he's just some low-level functionary or whatever, right? He's planning and attempting to execute the destruction in total of the human race.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not. I mean. And at that very moment, he is engaged in attempting to murder
Correct.
3 other people.
Exactly.
Right? So I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm not going to be all rah-rah about killing people, but this guy is clearly set up as a terrible monster.
Yes.
Right? Like, he's not. And I read somewhere, someone wrote in a blog post or something, that there might have been something heroic about General Zod's dedication to principle. I don't understand that way.
Well,
of thinking,
I think what they were trying to do in the movie, and they only partially succeeded, was to set up the idea of Zod being a true patriot to Krypton. And the idea that in order to that he had the opportunity to bring his people back, but the only way to do it was to kill a whole load of others. Now, at that point,
and
you and I
would say Slobodan Milosevic was a hero for the.
Right, and I think that's where and that's where the problem comes. I think there is a conceit, I think, in a lot of for a lot of people, that there is an inherent heroism in standing up for your beliefs. The problem is that sometimes your beliefs are just wrong, and standing up for them is not heroism; it's evil. It's like Adolf Hitler stood up for his beliefs very effectively. He was very true to his core self. He was very authentic. He was evil. No question about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a totally different story, right? If Zod shows up and says, hey, man, you're the key to restoring this amazing alien civilization. Let's go find a world that nobody currently lives on.
Absolutely.
Let's terraform it and get this whole party started again.
Mm-hmm.
And then Superman's like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that, friend. And
Well, then there was also a major logical issue, which is, why are they terraforming a planet where they're going to be all superheroes? Why are they making this planet one where they won't be so super? It doesn't make sense. You'd think they'd want to, restart the Kryptonian race in a place where they were all going to be gods.
Well, there's lots of potential issues. One might also ask why you can't simply knock Zod unconscious.
Well, because and the answer there is, first of all, at the moment, that was the only way of stopping, but also, at least that's the way they set it up, And the other question is, and this is a legitimate issue, but a difficult one, and I know your position on the death penalty, one which I mostly share, is the question of as long as someone like Zod is alive, there's always the possibility that they can do something else, particularly because there is no prison that could hold this guy. I mean, now I will say, other than the Phantom Zone, which for whatever reason he ended up not getting thrust into, and that's the problem.
Matt,
I want to go back a few minutes. I worry that you're being a bit of a Superman apologist, Ilan. I hear a lot of
yes, I am.
Exactly. I hear a lot of yeah, but this is kind of a way. I just didn't see him doing anything heroic. I think his wrestling with do I come out to the world, basically, was being dominated by his father when he was alive, and then after that was a product of guilt. I've talked to Ari about this previously. If it was really an internal battle and he was worried about what the effect on the world would be, then sure, there's some heroism in there. I just don't think it was presented that way. I think he was being told what to do to the point where he inexplicably let his father die from this belief, and then afterwards, I mean, he let his father die for this belief. So why would he couldn't possibly go back on it now because he can't discuss it with his father. And the idea of killing Zod being heroic in any way, I just don't see that at all. I think after watching them fly all over Metropolis, the idea that he couldn't all of a sudden, his arms weren't strong enough in this guy's neck to move his eyes away from the people he was about to kill. I think, and the idea of destroying Metropolis just because that's what gods would do on Earth. I think we saw the Avengers address that very well. Right from the start, when aliens came into the biggest city in America, we saw the immediate concern of these superheroes to keep it localized, keep it as narrow as possible, and they instructed law enforcement to get people out of that area. They themselves tried to help the people involved. So I think it's a cop-out by the writers. I think, I mean, as you say, they're trying to sell tickets. Maybe they could have been destroying giant redwood trees or mountains or something to show their destructive
you've
force.
Got a lot of people being annoyed about that too.
Yeah, or more of Smallville. They could have destroyed the rest of.
No, I think what you're saying is right. There were problems with the heroism in the movie. What I'm saying is that I disagree that there was no heroism. I agree that there were issues. No, there were issues with the heroism. I think I always go back and to, in terms of the heroism of Superman, I always go back though still to an aspect that wasn't explicitly dealt with in this, but was dealt with implicitly by the presence of Zod, which is that essentially, again, going back to the idea of the internal struggle, the heroism, in a sense, is what it takes to be someone that powerful to decide to be Superman rather than Zod. Right? In other words, we know that power corrupts, and power like that could easily corrupt absolutely. And so by setting up Superman versus Zod, Kal-El versus Zod, or really Clark versus Zod, they set up the idea of here is a person who, due to his internal integrity and the way he was raised, is able to overcome those what must be incredibly strong urges to use your abilities to have power over others. I'm not even saying for evil. But what is it? In every Superman movie, in every Superman comic, Jor-El and Lara send him to, in all the origin stories they've had, when they send him to Earth, and Lara goes, "Oh my God, he'll be on his own. It's so primitive." Jor-El goes, "He'll be a god." What essentially, how many people would have the strength of character to not use that power to abuse others, to oppress others, whatever? And I think having Zod in the movie sets up that duality.
I want to say too, Matt. I want to say too. I think that there is something. I want to suggest that there's something heroic to revealing yourself to the world, and I think that this is maybe we talked about this with the X-Men stuff. I'm certain that we talked about it with Jason Collins. When the world is not ready to accept who you are, nonetheless saying this is who I am. And it's important for me, and it's important for you. Despite the risk of doing that, I do think that there's something.
It's a story of sacrifice. It's sacrifice, right? I mean, he's sacrificing his privacy, his option to live a life, and also as Ilan, as you were just talking, then I was thinking that really that killing of Zod is a massive sacrifice. It's a decision that he makes to say, I'm choosing the lives of all of these people on Earth and giving up my heritage. I'm destroying my chance of living with my people ever again. Yeah. So it is. He
does that too easily. By the way, he does that too easily when he destroys the ship that has the ship that he found in the Arctic or whatever, and it's got all the little potential Kryptonians. Zod's like, hey man, if you destroy this ship, like that's it for us. Like we're done. And he's like, yeah, they had their chance. I think literally that's his line. I think he says they had their chance. Man, they could have done a lot with that. Like that could have been quite powerful.
Yeah, well, that came from his father, right? Didn't that come from Jor-El?
Maybe. Maybe I don't. Russell Crowe said so many things. I've forgotten now.
And he said them so well.
He really, I think I just have to take a minute and say the fathers. I don't want to let this podcast go without appreciating the fathers in this.
Absolutely.
There is something.
And I saw it with Mira on Father's Day.
See, perfect, perfect. Those dads really did a number on that guy.
Well, hey, at least it's not like, what is it, like, how did your mother mess you up? This was the fathers. And the truth is, this was an element that was set up in a lot of other versions of Superman, particularly in the TV show Smallville, where really there was there was this conflict between the philosophy of Jonathan Kent and the philosophy of Jor-El, who was basically a disembodied voice played by Terrence Stamp, who played Zod in Superman 2. But he was a disembodied voice. Well, they did a lot of that in Smallville. Yeah. His mother was played by the person who played Lana Lang in Superman 3. Anyway, so, bottom line is and his father was one of the Dukes of Hazzard. But anyway, he was the blonde Duke.
Schneider?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, but they set up this conflict between the Kansas values of Jonathan Kent and the Kryptonian values of Jor-El, this disembodied voice in the Fortress of Solitude, and so this idea that they were in conflict is a big part of the modern Superman mythos. And really did set up this aspect of internal struggle between the alien and the man.
I would have been a lot happier. And maybe the second movie will redeem this, right? Mm-hmm. I think, as you said, Ilan, so much depends on the, untitled Man of Steel 2 project.
Right.
Because, if Clark has like all kinds of PTSD from what happened in the first one, there's real opportunity there, just
Oh
as there
yeah.
was in this most recent Iron Man, although some of that was really kind of lost. But the notion that when you essentially go to war like this, there are real consequences, real costs. I think it'd be great if they did something with that in a sort of smart and sophisticated way. I think that having his little Fortress of Solitude ship destroyed is going to make that more difficult. And I think the ease with which they put on the stupid glasses and turned him into Clark Kent working at the Daily Planet,
Yeah.
I think really detracts from that as well, right?
Well, I
that
did
takes
I
away.
did a
mean,
sermon.
I know you have to do that. Right, you have
Yeah.
to do it. He has to be the guy wearing the glasses.
Well,
I think
I
the guy
think
who's like 6'5" and like chiseled.
Yeah, well, I think the good thing with that, which is what I was very happy about. I mean, I did a sermon many years ago about hidden identities, and I sort of said, look, you know what? You can still tell it's me. This is the dumbest disguise in the world, and it's even worse when Lois Lane, the very significant, talented investigative reporter can't tell that this guy in glasses is Superman. It's dumb. So at the very least, they got rid of that for Lois Lane by having her know who he is right from the get-go. They've made it so that at least with Lois Lane, it's not so stupid that she doesn't get it. Now everyone else, it's still stupid. Although in the 1970s, they actually came up with a really interesting actual answer, which I wish they would come back with, which is that Ma Kent used glass from the ship, and that glass had a special refracting nature that made him look wimpier when he put them on, so that he really did look different. And I wish they'd come back to that, because otherwise it is the dumbest disguise ever.
But I think I want to push further than that, right? I want there to be costs for him, right?
Yeah.
Now he's just living in Metropolis with a good job and hanging out with the girl that he likes, right? So that Kevin Costner was wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like,
here's the interesting thing. Kevin Costner was wrong in the way he did things. I mean, at least his Pa Kent's character there was kind of stupid. However, where he might not have been wrong is that there's a question as to, was the human race ready for that? And if so, might they have been more ready by the time that he actually reveals himself than when Pa Kent is giving him this advice? I don't know.
Yeah, because we also don't know how much time there is between Kevin Costner's tornado-related demise and the alien destruction of half of Metropolis. It seems like if you look at the characters, like they kind of messed up Henry Cavill's hair or whatever, but maybe 6 months.
Sorry, can you 1 second, honey? Are you picking up Mira? All right, I think she went to pick up Mira. Okay.
I think that what I would have liked was, him having to go and live in the Fortress of Solitude, right? Like, and be by himself.
One thing that I missed really was, I think it was a problem that it's clear that he's very torn and very disturbed by the decision he had to make. But all we got was a scream like "Khan" kind of deal to show that, and then we don't really get much of an impression that he's kind of had to go into seclusion and hiding to understand and explore his inner torment in any way. He just kind of gets out, and admit again, we don't really know how much time there is between when that happens and when he ends up in Metropolis. So it's possible that he spent a year in a cave somewhere before he went back to Metropolis. We don't know. I suspect there's a comic book series waiting to happen for that. The Lost Year. But other than that, we didn't really get much of a feeling that he was particularly struck by all the destruction that had occurred around him. And I think that was the part that bothered me. It wasn't so... the fact that he was bothered by killing Zod, and we didn't see much of that, was one thing. The fact that he didn't really seem to... There didn't seem to be much of a recognition of the, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people that died in Metropolis.
Right. It was kind of a...
Well, that was a little more troublesome for me.
Yeah. Well, that's that. We've solved that problem.
Back to work. They had their chance, right? I guess. There were, and I think you mentioned the Iron Man movie. I really enjoyed Man of Steel. I think as an exploration of the humanity of a superhero, Iron Man 3 did much better. And part of the reason it did much better, and this was also one of my problems with the Star Trek movie, is it actually gave you a little bit of time to breathe, to think about stuff, and to, as opposed to simply having 45 minutes of nonstop pummeling.
Though they also did have that in Iron Man.
They did have that, but they actually had some, they had a little bit more breathing space in between the pummeling to make you feel a little bit more about how they were feeling in the midst of what was going on. Whereas, we can guess at how Clark was feeling in the midst of being pummeled and all the rest of it, but we don't really know. It didn't set it up in a way that we can actually explore that.
Well, that's the big difference for me, and maybe Matt, weigh in here too. That's the big difference for me between Iron Man 3 and Man of Steel, and maybe between Iron Man and Superman in general, is that Iron Man 3, the vast majority of the time, he wasn't Iron Man.
Right.
Right? The vast majority of the film was like Tony Stark's adventure across America.
Although, of course, the message at the end of the movie is that he's Iron Man whether he's got the suit on or not.
Yeah.
Which is to some extent the point in Superman as well.
Right. But he's not doing Iron Man things for the majority of Iron Man 3, right? Yeah. He's driving around having panic attacks.
Yes.
And
creating very interesting relationships with 10-year-old boys. Yes.
Yeah. Whereas even when before Superman is Superman, he always has these powers. Yeah,
yes.
And he's always saving people and doing whatever it is he's doing.
Right.
Communing with the whales, and so on.
Desperately avoiding saving people. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think that the same. I think that's what attracts people to the story of the way Batman was presented as well in the Nolan movies. He was a person and he was struggling with his role. He was struggling with the decisions. He differently to Superman, who just kills his enemy at first opportunity. He refused to kill the Joker numerous times in the second movie, and he wrestles with what to do. And I didn't see Superman wrestling enough, and I think that's what you're talking about.
And I think this is part of where the breathing space would have been helpful, is that to me there needed to be a scene in between the pummeling, the first set of pummeling and his final pummeling and killing Zod, in which there was a discussion with his mother, with Lois Lane, with a random dog, I don't know, in which he talked about, I don't know how I'm going to stop him without killing him, so something where it shows that he's actually thought about that. But again, maybe part of the point here, again, was to set up the fact that he will never kill again. To set up the fact that we don't always think about our moral choices in that way until we've made them, and then have to deal with the consequences of them. And it's those consequences that make us become the people we are, that give us that integrity, that because I did X, I know I will never do that again.
Yeah.
Because
I hope you're right. Man, that would be a great second movie, right? And it would change the way that people think about this first movie. It would
yeah.
probably force people to watch it again, really reevaluate and so on. I hope but that's a huge chance to take, right?
Mhm.
To have a less blockbustery, more introspective second film on a billion-dollar franchise. That's
Well, but I don't think
a
they
hell of
need
a
to
choice.
do. I don't think they need to do that. I think they can still have a huge blockbustery. I think to me, what'll really be telling is if in the final moments of dealing with whoever the villain is,
Lex Luthor.
well, yeah, okay, whoever. Well, it'll be Lex Luthor plus something else. Yeah, because if we have to deal with another real estate deal, I'm done. But whatever the villain is, that I think they will be able to deal effectively with the fallout from this if he explicitly has to find a way of dealing with this other than killing. In other words, if he's faced with the same dilemma again, where, the army people or Lois Lane go, the only way you can deal with this is to kill him. He has to die, and he goes, no, I will never do that again, and finds a different way, then that will resolve that issue,
Yeah.
I think.
You could also do a montage, right?
They only
Sadness
do those in
montage.
1980s sports movies.
A sadness montage from the 1980s. You could have him running up a mountain carrying a log on his back like Rocky IV. Whatever.
That's
I mean,
right.
there's all sorts of things you could do.
A truck on his back with this guy. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. But it's definitely going to be Lex Luthor, right? I mean...
No, the answer is it will be. The question is not whether it will be Lex Luthor. The question is who is the big gun that Lex Luthor will create, discover, and then set against him.
I hope it's Bane.
Sorry?
Sorry.
Bane. Right. Perhaps not. Also, Mr. Mixaplix will make me turn off as well. That one will...
Now you've dredged too deep into comic book lore.
Don't worry about it. But the answer is what I'm expecting is that Lex Luthor will have a Machiavellian plot to destroy Superman by means of some huge, significant, super-powered being, whatever that may be. As I said, again, if he has to choose to not kill this time and finds a different way, that will be the arc that will make me happy.
Well, Ilan, in 2015, we will invite you back to the Hero Report to talk about...
There may be a couple of movies going on before that. It's a pity. I would have loved to talk to you about Star Trek, except I cannot think of what to talk about heroism in Star Trek. At least in this movie.
No. Maybe I think our next Matt and Ari at the movies, we should... Sorry, I saw a preview during Man of Steel for Pacific Rim.
Oh God!
I'm pretty sure.
Non-Asians doing big robot movies. That's going to be interesting.
I'm sure we're going to have a lot of hero-related questions with that one. For example, something about two-person controlled giant robots fighting non-robotic water monsters, as far as I can tell.
Well, the other one that I saw a preview for, which actually might have some interesting heroism questions, is World War Z.
Oh, sure.
That one might. Anyway.
I don't think we're going to get much out of that movie, from what
I'm not sure either. But you never know.
Never know.
Zombies are bad. Killing them is heroic.
Right. There you go.
We're coming up on our normal hour length here, so
all right.
I think ultimately I enjoyed the movie. I think they really missed out on an opportunity to show heroism. I think they missed out on a couple of key opportunities, but I did enjoy it, and I really hope that they, as you've been saying, Ilan, capitalize on this for the next movie and don't just repeat what they've done here. I think
I think if they do repeat what they've done here, they really missed the opportunity.
Yeah, and I also think, just to close, the most interesting thing to me is undoubtedly that everybody. I mean, this was a movie about a hero, right?
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And if you ask most people, this was a superhero movie, and the things that Superman did were heroic things, right?
Correct.
He saved some people's lives. He rescued the girl. He made a hard choice. He was heroic. And it
Right.
would be fascinating if they take some chances with the second movie to see what people who thought of this as a hero movie would then think about a movie in which he really sort of confronts the kinds of choices he made or failed to make.
Right.
That would be fascinating.
Well, yeah, if there is some genuine fallout to him killing Zod that you can see on screen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you all. This
My
was
pleasure.
fun. I don't know how many thumbs up we give it, but I do think we all enjoyed it, right?
We did.
To varying degrees, and we thought that it was more or less successful in terms of being about heroism. But nonetheless, lots of buildings were destroyed, and Kevin Costner proves once again that if you put him anywhere near a cornfield, he is just dynamite. That guy will act the hell out of being in Iowa or Kansas.
Yeah, the problem is it's all he can do. He's like it's like Sean Connery in that accent. It's like, hello, I am a Russian submarine captain. Can't you tell?
I'll take him in a cornfield any day. If there's a desert island and I have to say I'm going to make one movie on a desert island that gets me off of that desert island. Yeah. My setting is a cornfield.
Put Kevin Costner on water, and it's awful.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Okay. This was fun, and we'll do it again soon. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Live long and prosper.